274. Good morning. We'll give Beth just a minute. I did not get her a list as I was prepping for teaching class and didn't realize I was leading singing today too. So I'm still working on that a little bit. 274. We're going to sing the first and the third verse of that. I'm not sure who's reading for us this morning. Clint's going to read for us. Jack Barber's going to lead our opening prayer in just a few moments. Let me get to the right song. That'd be important, wouldn't it?
I have found a friend in Jesus. He's everything to me. He's a fairest of 10,000 to my soul. The lily of the valley, the bright and morning star. In sorrow, he's my comfort. In trouble, he's my stay. He tells me every care on him to roll. He's a lily of the valley, the bright and morning star. He's the fairest of 10,000 to my soul. He will never, never leave me, nor yet forsake me here, while I live by faith and do his blessed will. A wall of fire about me, I've nothing now to fear. With his manna he my hungry soul shall fill. Then sweeping up to glory, to see his blessed face, where rivers of delight shall ever roll. He's a lily of the valley, the bright and morning star. He's the fairest of 10,000 to my soul.
This morning's scripture reading will be from Matthew chapter 5, verses 1 through 16. And seeing the multitudes, he went up into a mountain, and when he was set, his disciples came unto him, and he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are they which do hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Blessed are they which are persecuted after righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are ye when men shall revile you and persecute you, and shall say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven, for so which persecuted they the prophets which were before you. Ye are the salt of the earth, but if the salt have lost its savor, wherewith shall it be salted? It is thenceforth good for nothing, but to be cast out and be trodden under foot of men. You the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hid. Neither do men light a candle and put it under a bushel, but on a candlestick, and it giveth light unto all that are in the house. Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven.
Our Father in heaven, we thank you so very much for another Lord's Day and the opportunities that we have this day to worship you, the true and living God. We thank you for the time we have to study your Bible at this time. Be with us, be with the teachers, be with the students, and help us, Father, to always search the Word to make sure that what we do is acceptable to you. Be with us now as we go to class. Be with us on through this new week. In Christ's name, amen. You can go to class.
Yes, it is too hot to sleep in the doghouse these days. No, my dogs don't have any air conditioning on. They do have some shade, thank goodness. All right, John chapter 7. Terry finished chapter 6 up last week. So, trivia time a little bit. Review time a little bit. So in chapter 6, what was the timing of the events around John chapter 6? Okay. But even kind of bigger than that. Okay. Even a little bigger than that. Passover. So we talked a little bit about the Passover. And we know that the Passover was April, pretty much most of the time. And then 50 days later you had Pentecost. And then those were the first two major pilgrimage celebrations, if you will, festivals, if you will, for the Jews. What's the third? Feast we're going to look at in John chapter 7. Okay? So who has in their Bible something besides Feast of the Tabernacles? Feast of Booths? Anybody else? Every once in a while you might hear it called the Feast of Tents. So this feast is basically 6 months from Passover. Octoberish, September, Octoberish, if I remember right in my study. About harvest time. So there was kind of two things that went into, for the Jews in this day and time, there were kind of two things that went into this feast. Number one was it was kind of a Thanksgiving harvest celebration. That's kind of the earthly part of this. I think, Mike, you mentioned that when we were talking about Passover a few weeks ago. And the other part was, what are they celebrating? Well, they're celebrating from a spiritual or religious standpoint at the Feast of Tabernacles, the Feast of Booths. What are they remembering? Yes, they're remembering the Exodus. They're remembering those times when they were basically living in tents. And their tents probably weren't near as fancy as the tents of today's age. They might have been nothing more than some canvas, at best, thrown over, some poles. They weren't necessarily the most luxurious tents. I think some of the movies kind of build them up to be prettier tents in that day than they might have been. But they were still shelter. And during that time, as Terry mentioned, God provided for them all the things that they needed. The bread. And was it last chapter, in chapter 6, he talked about being the bread of life. And that kind of goes along with the thought that maybe this is becoming, that event at the end, is it somewhat closer to the Feast of Booths, Terry? We don't know exactly. We do know that there's at least somewhere around 6 months in here that John doesn't really cover a whole lot. During that time, if you go to the other synoptics, Kaufman, let me pull Kaufman back up here. Kaufman mentioned at least 3 events mentioned in synoptic gospels. There's the right button. All right, so in Matthew 16, Peter's confession, another feeding of a great multitude in Mark chapter 9, and the transfiguration witnessed by the 12 in Luke chapter 9. And like I say, all of what's going to happen here from basically chapter 7 to about chapter 10 is going to be in this 6 months leading up to the next Passover. The next Passover is the events of it are going to start around John chapter 10, John chapter 11. So you think about it, John is pretty much going to cover the ministry part of Jesus in half the book. And then we're going to see the rest of the half of the book devoted to what happened when Passover started and through the time that Jesus goes back to God. So one of the things John does is he really packs a lot of the end-of-life details, I think, more so than some of the other Gospels do. We're going to get a lot more information about those end-of-life details. So let's look at some of the characters that are going to be in our study today. Okay. 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 Right. Okay. If you had some money, I'd agree. But if you didn't have some money, I don't know that I'd totally agree. You know,
It was a fun feast. I had read somewhere one time that the Jews loved this feast more than any of them because it was like a big camp out.
right.
A barbecue. I mean,
They brought their tents, and it basically became,
tents, they had
what's the big music?
reading of the law.
Yeah.
With Nehemiah, if you'll look at Nehemiah, he restored, they found the book, we started reading the law. We studied Nehemiah the other day, but we didn't discuss the restoration of the feast.
Okay.
And they started reading the law, and they found this section for the Feast of the Tabernacles. Well, let's do it. The people said, well, let's do it. And
Right.
they restarted that feast,
Yeah.
which they hadn't done in years of captivity.
You know, from a way they're living, it'd almost be like one of these big music festivals where people just come and they're bringing tents and they're bringing RVs and
Bring your tent.
camper and things like that, and you just got literally thousands.
It's a joyous
Right.
festival,
Right.
full of joy.
Right.
According to Thayer's Bible Dictionary, they didn't even have to come very far. If you lived in Jerusalem area, they would set up their booths or tents on their roof or in their courtyard.
Okay.
If they had such.
If they had such.
Otherwise, it was out in the streets.
Right.
But if you see the construction in the Middle East, and I've lived in the Mediterranean, I've visited several Middle Eastern countries. Almost everything has a flat roof.
Right.
That's considered part of our living space
Right.
when we rent that place.
Right.
So you got a nice flat roof, put your tent up there, and have at it.
I bet they charge as much per square foot for the roof as they do the rest of it too.
Absolutely.
So this Feast of Tents, Feast of Booths is it's a big deal, and it's gonna enter into giving us some more information about the way the people are looking at Jesus, the way Jesus is looking at, hey, I'm in the last 6 months now. I'm in the last 6 months now. Time's winding down. My time is coming, but as we'll read here in just a minute, it's not yet come. It's coming, but it's not yet come. So let's look at some of the characters in here. In verse 3, it says, "So his brothers." What was your first thought when you read "so his brothers"? I'll tell you mine. I mean, you're my brother. You're my brother. I was thinking about my Christian brothers, and my first thought, I was thinking about the disciples and especially the apostles. And then you go read just a little bit further, and what does it say about this group of brothers? They do not believe. So we know it's not the disciples or the apostles. So who are these brethren? Do what? Family. These are actually most likely his brothers. I don't know how much you read Kaufman about, the family of Jesus. We don't know a whole lot. Secular history is most of what's known about Jesus and the brothers. Joseph and the brothers. We get a little more of Mary, a little bit of the brothers as we go along. But early on, the only ones that probably really believed were Mary and Joseph. And somewhere, nobody knows exactly where, who disappears from that? Joseph. Yeah. You hear nothing of Joseph really after they go get Jesus from the temple. Other than we know that Jesus was trained as a carpenter. So we know Jesus was at least around Joseph long enough to become working age, probably 14 to 19, 22, something like that. And secular history suggests that Joseph may have died when Jesus was 19 or 20 years old. Nobody knows for sure. But he's not mentioned anywhere around the cross. He's not mentioned when we talk about the family of Jesus. It's brothers and Mary pretty much exclusively after the events of the temple and them going and getting Jesus out of the temple. As these events unfold and Jesus becomes suspect to the Pharisees, and we see in this story, his brothers try to, and I don't get into the whole detail, but his brothers try to get him to go to the feast. So they're still maybe kind of leaning with who in their thought process right now? Jesus or the Pharisees? They don't believe, so I think they're leaning a little more toward the Pharisees. So we've talked about there were maybe spies in the camp. I don't think Jesus' brothers were spies necessarily. But I think at this point in time, if we look at the events that are surrounding here, they've been investigating Jesus pretty hard. And those investigations led to questions of different and various people. Kaufman suggested maybe even Mary and or Joseph at some point may have been questioned by the Pharisaic authorities at some point. They didn't let on as to, a lot of the things that they knew necessarily, as far as we know. How much the brothers told them, we don't know. Probably the brothers were involved. I mean, if something happens with a family member, where's the first place the police are going to go? Family. I mean, in those domestic violence situations where a spouse gets hurt or killed, who's the first person they're going to think about? Most of the time. The spouse. Family. And if it's one of those abuse cases, it's going to be potentially a child sticking up for the other parent. So typically it's looking at family. So there's this thought process. Did the family actually have some still connection with the Pharisee council? And let's stop with that discussion right there. So the other two groups of people in this story are going to be the Pharisees in general, and then the Jews, I guess the Jews that are living in Jerusalem at the time. And we're going to see the Pharisees, we know from at least the last Passover, if not before, they're trying to get enough whatever to kill Jesus. They won't kill him for a while. And that's why he has spent so much time where? In Galilee. So if you remember, we talked about it 2 or 3 weeks ago. Galilee's up in the north by the sea. You've got Samaria in between. And then you've got Judea, where you've got Jerusalem and everything that goes on with basically what's left of the Jewish religious empire. Now, they still have synagogues. They have a synagogue in Capernaum. We're going to see that later. They still have them. But still, the main things with the ruling Jewish religion happen in Jerusalem. Kind of like if you were Catholic, where does everything revolve to? Rome. So like I say, everything still revolves around Jerusalem, and we know the Pharisees in Jerusalem are ready to kill him. What about a lot of the people in Jerusalem? I don't disagree. Some of them probably didn't. We'll hit that again. We'll hit that in a minute. We'll hit that again in just a minute. What about some of the people around the Sea of Galilee last week? What happened at the end when Jesus said, I am the bread of life, and you're going to have to basically eat my bread? A lot of them left. Well, you want to bet that story's got back to Jerusalem. It's been 6 months. I just about guarantee you some of that story's got back to Jerusalem too. But as a whole, when this feast comes up, you can almost look at it like the Pharisees are going to be waiting there, ready to kill him. And here on the other side are a lot of the people who are still in love with him. But their love might only go so far, Greg. It goes just short of bumping against the Pharisees. So, let's start reading. Let's start verse 1 through about verse 9, and we'll see if we've missed anything through there. Rick, can you read for us this morning, verse 1 through 9 there, John chapter 7? Get back to it, that's fine. Then you don't have to listen to me for a minute.
After this, Jesus went around into Galilee. He did not want to go about in Judea because the Jewish leaders there were looking for a way to kill him. But when the Jewish festival of tabernacles was near, Jesus' brothers said to him, Leave Galilee and go to Judea so that your disciples there may see the works you do. No one who wants to become a public figure acts in secret. Since you are doing these things, show yourself to the world. For even his own brothers did not believe in him. Therefore Jesus told them, My time is not yet here. For you, any time will do. The world cannot hate you, but it hates me, because I testify that its works are evil. You go to the festival. I am not going up to this festival because my time has not yet fully come. After this, or after he had said this, he stayed in Galilee.
Okay, so he has this discussion with his brothers. The brothers want him to go to the Feast of Booths. They're going, it looks like they're going to do their pilgrimage, set up their booths, and go celebrate with everybody there. And they want Jesus to do the same. The Jews are plotting to kill him. And they're not just plotting. They're serious at this point. You know, it would remind me, Mike, of almost a jihadist type, event. They're plotting to get him. Similar to what a jihadist might be plotting against something against the United States even, or some other country right now. They're working hard to get him. So Jesus basically says two things. My time's not yet come. Y'all go on. Y'all just go on. And he almost, in the way that reads, he says what? I'm not going. Right? That's kind of the way it reads, right? I'm not going. All right, well, let's go further. Clint, will you pick up? Now you read earlier. I won't make you use your voice. You good? All right, read that next section, verse 14 to about verse 24. So verse 14, he goes. You know, some people can find anything to try to gripe about or complain about or find a fault in. And one of the discussions in this is, did Jesus lie to his brothers? Did he? No, he did not. He went. Now, one of the ways that this is looked at by some scholars is and even some of the Jews at that time, if you did not go to the whole festival, you did not go. If you missed half the meeting, the CE meeting, you got no CE credit at all. Thank goodness that's not the way it works in our world today, or I would not get any credit at all, because I don't sit in on all the CE meetings, even at a meeting. Going to San Antonio in a few months, and I can get 20 hours. I don't need 20. So I'm not going to sit through 20, but I'm going to get the ones that I want. But in this day and age with this feast, if you didn't go for the whole thing, sometimes people, well, you didn't go. So he went, but he went in, it says, not openly in some versions. Anybody else have anything there? Did it say somewhere else in there, Terry, he went quietly or stealthily or something? He basically did not announce he was going. Why did he not announce he was going? He didn't want to bring attention to himself. His time was not come. He did not want the Jews trying to arrest him at this feast. Go ahead.
Back in verse 4, his brothers tell him, no one who wants to become a public figure acts in secret.
True.
So they were accusing him of wanting to be a public
figure.
Look at me.
Right.
Pay attention
Yeah.
to me.
Good thought. Good thought.
He's not going for that.
No. And he actually addresses this with the people further down in this section that we'll get to in just a minute, when he talks about, why should you listen to me? Why am I true versus those who are not true? He addresses that. Good thought. But he goes into Jerusalem quietly. He goes in after about 3 days. But where does it first mention he goes? To the temple. He goes right in the middle of the hornet's nest. He's getting right in the middle of all the bad guys. When Greg taught class Wednesday night, I mentioned, if you look at the way Jesus talks in these last few chapters, sometimes he talks, Terry, like, I don't want to stir them up anymore. But sometimes, like today, he's gonna get back on them again. It may not be quite as hard driven, but he does say in one place to his brothers especially, I tell the world they're evil. That's why they hate me. I tell the world they're evil. That's why they hate me. They won't hate you, but they're going to hate me. And they do hate me. Verse 10, he's talking about he did not publicly go, but he went in private. And again, why? Jews were looking for him. As the people see him, you kind of have, like Greg said, you got a little bit of division among them. Most of the people there can remember 6 months ago when he healed the guy. And they remember he healed him on the Sabbath day. And of course, right now, what are the Pharisees probably still trying to arrest him on? Right? What's the one charge that they've got? Breaking the Sabbath. Breaking the Sabbath. So that he's going to defend that. Here, it's been 6 months since it happened, but he's fixing to come back and he's going to defend that in just a minute. So he went to the temple. He began teaching. The Jewish people marvel. Who do you not see hardly say a word in this discourse? Even what we're going to study today through maybe verse 32-ish maybe. But even through the rest of the chapter, you don't hear much until the very end of this discussion from who? Apostles. The apostles, but also the Pharisees. Pharisees are pretty quiet. Jesus puts up a pretty good defense. Watch as he does this. Rick, they change from, we're going to get you because you're a Sabbath breaker, to when Passover comes back around, what did he do? He blasphemes. And they had to get people to lie about it to get that to stick. So Jesus deals with their arguments of why they should kill him today. And we'll talk more about some of these Sabbath-breaking arguments in just a minute. So going back to Rick's comment, he tells the people here, here's why you should listen to me. Here's why you should believe in me. I don't talk about me. Who do I talk about? My Father. And the people that are trying to build themselves up and do it for their own glory, who do they talk about? Themselves. And then you got some in between. You got some pretty good, I'm not going to mention any names, but you got some pretty good TV evangelists that do a pretty good job of trying to walk the middle. Right? I think so. I don't watch them a lot, but every once in a while I'm flipping through there, and it's hard to miss J.O. sometimes. I didn't say his name, but you just watch the guy, and he's to me, he's arrogant as all get out. Just watching him. But he talks about God. At least he is talking about God. But just watching him and the way he carries himself. Have you ever had, even in our associations here, Terry, Mike, we ever had a gospel preacher that kind of came, a gospel meeting preacher kind of came across as arrogant, and people were kind of, Yeah, sometimes. And I don't think the guys that we bring in for gospel meetings mean to be that way. They're trying to preach Jesus. They're trying to preach the truth, but sometimes it's their presentation and a little bit their attitude. But we know some of those TV evangelists are not totally preaching the truth. Most of them aren't. So he's telling them, here's why you should listen to me. I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about my Father. And in places here, he's also mentioning the Spirit. You'll see some references to the Spirit at times too. But the one he talks about, why does he talk about God to them? Who are they supposed to be tied to in the old law? Moses, but from a spiritual, heavenly standpoint, God. He's trying to relate them back to where they already are. In the old way of teaching people, take them from where they are to where they need to go. And that's what he was trying to do, was take them from where they are to where they need to go. Sometimes he was successful, but sometimes he wasn't. And especially by the time Passover rolled around, Greg, more of them fell back into the Pharisaic thinking than at least right now.
They're still trying to hold on real tight to Abraham.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that gets into a little bit this discussion of Sabbath. So let's move on. Anybody else have a comment about that? One thing mentioned there. The crowd, as he tells them that they're trying to kill him. Apparently, a lot of people don't know they're trying to kill Jesus. And they say to him, what? You're a demon. You don't know what you're talking about. You're crazy.
Well, the Pharisees, as a political party, were just like politics today. They didn't want to act without public
Approval. They wanted their approval rating high.
They're trying to lead the public over to think that this guy's evil. This guy's up to the devil.
Way the poll's leaning.
Right. And Rick's probably studied more military history than any of us, I bet. But when you look at that approval rating, if it's not there, what tends to happen more so, and I think more so even in that day than today, the people would mob the Capitol, try to overthrow the government. And what did the Pharisees not want? They didn't want that. They didn't want the people taking over. So you're right, Carrie. They're walking a tightrope too. Jesus is kind of walking a line and a tightrope a little bit. You know, how far can I teach and still stay alive till my time has come?
Well, the Pharisees and that whole crowd also didn't want the people turning into a rabble, because then the Romans would come down
Absolutely.
hard on them
Absolutely.
and take away some of the power they did have.
Because they can't keep them under control. If the Jewish leaders couldn't keep the Jewish people under control, then Rome was going to come in, and because Rome had kind of given them free will up to this point to kind of lead themselves, more or less, in a lot of things. Rome had left some soldiers there, but they did not have a huge garrison like would come along later when they take over Rome, when they take over Jerusalem. I finally got it right, Miss Scarlett. You didn't have to correct me that time. All right. So here comes this Sabbath day argument. Here comes this Sabbath day argument. When did the Sabbath actually... No, I'm sorry. Yes, Sabbath day. When did the Sabbath day actually begin?
Sundown Friday.
Okay. But when did the practice originate? With the... Yeah, but it was really hammered home with the law of Moses. I don't disagree, but it was really hammered home with the law of Moses. When did circumcision start? Abraham. And that was before the law. So here you have these Pharisees. This thing that Jesus is telling them and talking to them about is, you'll take, because the law says to circumcise a child on what day?
Eighth day.
The 8th day. What happens if the 8th day falls on the Sabbath when you're not supposed to do any work? What'd they do? They did it anyway. Nobody thought anything about it. I don't think God thought anything about it, because they were doing, the right thing, and they were doing a religious thing that he had told them to do. Boy, there's just 2 or 3 places here that this thing and I just don't get along. So he takes that and he goes, guys, you'll take the Sabbath day and you'll take this child to consecrate him as a Jew, if you will, and you'll circumcise him. But you get mad at me for healing a man, making him body and soul whole. That's what he told them. You get mad at me because on the Sabbath day, I made this man's body physically whole and I made him spiritually whole. Ooh. If they were listening, did they get a little bit smaller and a little bit quieter? How do you argue with that? And that's one reason that I think we see the Pharisees kind of start backing off a little bit, and they don't actually just keep building this event into the crucifixion then. The other thing is, Jesus said, it's not my time. And I believe, as Kaufman says, there are factors at work here that are probably divine to keep that from happening at this day. The other thing that Kaufman mentioned with them and their Sabbaths, that they kind of, the Jews, if they wanted to break Sabbath, guess what they do? If we really want to do something, do we do it? When Mama said, you can't have a piece of candy, and Mama turned her back, and you really wanted that piece of candy, what'd you do, Charles? You got that piece of candy. So one of the things that the Jews couldn't do is they couldn't walk more than, a mile a day? And they couldn't carry more than such and such. So Kaufman mentioned this event that if they wanted to go further than a mile a day, they would walk like 6/10 or 7/10 or 7/8 of a mile. They would stop. They had a little meal with them. They'd stop and they'd eat that meal, and that was their new house for the day. And they could use that as an excuse to keep going on. Multiple times during the day. Every 7/8 of a mile, they'd stop, have a meal. That's my new house, so I can keep going on.
That's Pharisee law.
That's Pharisee law. None of that was Jewish law.
Their livestock got out, ox went in the ditch, they go work.
They go get him. They had made up the way they wanted. It was. Now, there were things that were biblical, but they had taken it to such a ridiculousness almost. Is that a good word? That is a good word. It's almost ridiculous at times. Terry, I don't know if we want to go. Yeah, maybe we can get this next section. But he makes this thing. You judge me because of what you've done, or with what you've done, you judge me. And I did something even better. That's basically the argument, right? Okay? So let's pick up in verse 25, and let's kind of go over what the people think. Terry, we'll probably let you get started next week in verse 32-ish, probably. Let me just read the rest of this. Verse 25, some of the people of Jerusalem therefore said, is not this the man whom they seek to kill? So some of the people did apparently know. After and here he is speaking openly, and they say nothing. And because they say nothing, look at this next question. Can it be that the authorities know that this is the Christ? I think a lot of them do. You know, later in the chapter, Terry's going to go over, you know, Nicodemus, I think, seeing a lot more than maybe some of the others did. Verse 27, but we know where this man comes from. And when the Christ appears, no one will know where he comes from. So Jesus proclaimed as he taught in the temple, you know me and you know where I come from, but I have not come of my own accord. He who sent me is true, and him you do not know. Who is him there? Him you do not know. They don't know God. Yep. I know him, for I come from him, and he sent me. So they were seeking to arrest him. This is the Pharisees, but no one laid a hand on him because his hour had not yet come. Yet many of the people believed in him. They said, when the Christ appears, he will do no more signs than this man has done. They've seen so much out of Jesus that even they can't fathom seeing more signs from somebody else to prove that he's Christ. That's what John says right there. These Jews, the Jews of Jerusalem especially, have seen so much from Jesus and the special works that he did. Who else could come and do more and prove he's the Christ? And we'll stop right there. Any questions, comments?
Because also if you look at when he comes in for the last week of his life, the first part of his last week of his life, they throw him pomegranates
Right.
in front of him.
I agree. There's a lot of people in Jerusalem who are still more Jesus than not. Wait till Passover, though.
In verse 28 where it says he cried, I had to look at that word.
Okay.
It means he screamed.
He screamed.
Jesus screamed, you know me. You don't know God.
Yep.
In the temple.
Pretty strong. I agree. All right. Anybody else? Terry, pick up in verse 32. Thank you for your time, your attention, your comments. Thank you. Is it hot in here? Or is it just me? I guess it's that coffee. I'm sweating, Mike. I'm sorry. It's perspiring when you have your good clothes. It's sweating when you have your work clothes on. Did it? Okay. Okay.